Okay, well, welcome back. And today we're going to get right into it, and we're going to be talking about some of the Facebook news, the Facebook leaks that have come out recently, or, well, not too super recently, but there have definitely been a lot of articles written about it and a lot of information going around as to the social media site and all that kind of stuff. And as you can see, the article that I have queued up here, a lot of these talk about radicalizing their users. So let's see what this has to offer for us, and if we can get some kind of commentary maybe on it, um, and see what we're looking at here. So the article starts off: Carol's journey, what Facebook knew about how it radicalized users. Internal documents suggest Facebook has long known its algorithms and recommendation systems push some users to extremes. Okay, so start with the article here. It says, in summer of 2019, a new Facebook user named Carol Smith signed up for the platform, describing herself as a politically conservative mother from Wilmington, North Carolina. Smith's account indicated an interest in politics, parenting, and Christianity, and followed a few of her favorite brands, including Fox News and then President Donald Trump. Okay, so far, what do we have in our description? The only thing that we have is where she is from, and like how she describes herself politically, that she's a mother, and that she's interested in politics as well, parenting, Christianity, and then followed Fox News and President Donald Trump. So we already know she's set up as someone who is politically conservative, right? So let's see what else we can get from this. Let's see. Though Smith had never expressed interest in conspiracy theories, in just 2 days, Facebook was recommending she join dedicated QAnon, or groups dedicated to QAnon, a sprawling and baseless conspiracy theory and movement that claimed Trump was secretly saving the world from a cabal of pedophiles and Satanists. Okay, so first thing I'm seeing here, or first thing that's giving me questions. What else was she doing, right? If you just follow Fox News and President Trump, does it automatically take just 2 days and it starts recommending QAnon groups, right? So my question would be here: what is it actually? Is it all of these things combined, right? Is it her where she lives, perhaps? What her affiliation is, other things she follows that got to here, right? So the algorithm of things is going to look at it and going to say, it's going to take all of her information, right? And it's going to look at it and say, these are things you're more likely to be interested in, right? It wouldn't if people who didn't all have all of these boxes already checked, then it wouldn't have recommended the QAnon stuff to her, right? But it's because that chances are maybe the area she lives, there's a lot of people who like that stuff. The other thing Facebook does, and we know this for a fact because there's a documentary on Netflix about this, that Facebook can tell how long a user looks at a specific piece of content. So if you're scrolling through and you see something that comes across your page, and you want to, and you specifically spend the time reading it or looking at it, or even better, you interact with it, you click on the link and you go to something, it's going to look at that and recognize, oh, you've spent a lot more time looking at this than you have the other topics, other stuff. So you're going to be in a situation where it's going to look at that and say, well, maybe this Carol Smith, this fictitious person here, I'm assuming she's fictitious or it's a changed name, if she looked at conspiracy theory content and spent a lot of time on it and didn't just scroll right past it, Facebook is going to look at that and say, oh, you must want to interact with this kind of material, right? Because here's the thing, if the whole narrative is, oh, it's always profits over people, whatever, Facebook is not going to spend time showing you stuff that it doesn't think you would be interested in. So this isn't this individual person that it's making extreme. It's this collection of boxes that she's checking of all of these things, where she is, things she likes, whatever, is leading her down this pipeline. And it took 2 days. And we think, like, this is presenting, and I think at least, that 2 days is like, well, this crazy short amount of time. How in 2 days is doing it? I think that's just because it's that efficient, okay? But let's read on. We'll see if they give us any more, like, qualifiers or figure out what we got here. So it says Smith didn't follow the recommended QAnon groups, but whatever algorithm Facebook was using to determine how she should engage with the platform, it's not showing, okay, this is where I'm going to take issue. The algorithm is not determining how she should engage the platform. It is trying to determine how she will engage the platform, what she is already trying to do, and it wants to give her more of that stuff. Okay. Within 1 week, Smith's feed was full of groups and pages that had violated Facebook's own rules, including those against hate speech and disinformation. I have some questions. I want to see what groups was she being recommended. When it says it violated the rules, which groups were these? Actually name them, because you can name them and say, and if I were to say search for them, they shouldn't show up anymore, because if they've been banned or whatever, you have to, if you're doing something like this and you're trying to prove something, you have to tell me what it is. Well, they violated hate speech and what did they say? How do we know that they did? You're not just making this up. You have to provide some kind of information and what you did. What things did you interact with? Who did you add as a friend with this person, right? But I'm sure they'll get into that here. It says here, Smith wasn't a real person. A researcher employed by Facebook invented the account along with those of other fictitious test users in 2019 and 2020 as part of an experiment in studying the platform's role in misinforming and polarizing users through its recommendations systems. It says the researcher said Smith's Facebook experience was a barrage of extreme conspiratorial and graphic content. Okay. The body of research consistently found Facebook pushed some users into rabbit holes, increasingly narrow echo chambers where violent conspiracy theories thrived. People radicalized through these rabbit holes and made up a small slice of total users, but at Facebook scale, that can be millions of individuals. Now, again, this is something where you didn't, the user, the person who's making up this test account, is not just sitting there and Facebook is looking at them and saying, oh, you must want all of these things and showing them to them. Okay. Their algorithms, like I said before, they can determine how long you look at something. So unless this person in this controlled test environment spent the same amount of identical time scrolling through every single ad or every single page that popped up and looked at every single one of them, and then you can say, okay, all things considered equal, this is what they want. The other thing is, even if it's a brand new user, okay, and we have up here, and she has these boxes that they've checked for the person, okay, Facebook is using that and is comparing that to already gathered data. So yes, is it a problem? Does that indicate there's maybe a problem? Sure, it could. It could say that, hey, maybe everyone who enjoys Fox News and former President Trump wants to follow these QAnon pages. Maybe Facebook looks at it and says, okay, well, people who like these things or check these boxes, we show them QAnon content, and 2/3 of them end up staying on the site longer, clicking through the content, and viewing more of the content, okay? Well, if they do that, then Facebook is going to continue to recommend that to people because it's going to say, oh, this was successful. We want to keep people on our website. The other thing, too, is the users are a little bit to blame here because the users want that kind of content, because if they didn't want it when it was being shown to them, they would report it, they would hide it, ignore it, scroll past it really quickly. They wouldn't care, okay? The findings, communicated in a report titled Carol's Journey to QAnon, were among thousands of pages of documents, including disclosures made to the Securities and Exchange Commission and provided to Congress in redacted form by legal counsel for Frances Hagen, who worked as a Facebook product manager until May. Hagen is now asserting whistleblower status and has filed several specific complaints that Facebook puts profit over public safety. Earlier this month, she testified about her claims before a Senate subcommittee. Versions of these disclosures, which redacted the names of researchers, including the author of Carol's Journey to QAnon, were shared digitally and reviewed by a consortium of news organizations, including NBC News, The Wall Street Journal, published a series of reports based on the documents last month. While this was a study of one hypothetical user, it is a perfect example of research the company does to improve our systems and helped inform our decision to remove QAnon from the platform, a Facebook spokesperson said in response to emailed questions. So it sounds like they're doing their job, right? Like they've been removed from the platform. So it sounds like that research is what they wanted to do. Yeah. Anyway, reading on. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg has broadly denied Hagen's claims, defending his company's industry-leading research program and its commitment to identifying important issues and work on them. The documents released by Hagen partly support those claims, but also highlight the frustrations of some of the employees engaged in that research, okay? Obviously, again, we've said this before, if you have any employee of any company, you can find someone who's disgruntled. Among Hagen's disclosures are research reports and internal posts that suggest that Facebook has long known its algorithms and recommendation system push some users to extremes. Sure, if you I mean, like we said before, if you check all the boxes and you fit the profile, so to speak, yeah, they're going to recommend to you things that people like you tend to go towards. Because again, they want to keep you on the site longer and longer. And while some managers and executives ignored the internal warnings, anti-vaccine groups, conspiracy theory movements, and disinformation agents took advantage of their permissiveness, threatening public health, personal safety, and democracy at large. A little hyperbolic, but okay. These documents effectively confirm what outside researchers were saying for years prior, which was often dismissed by Facebook, said Renee DiResta, technical research manager at the Stanford Institute Internet Observatory and one of the earliest harbingers of the risks of Facebook's recommendation algorithms. Facebook's own research shows how easily a relatively small group of users has been able to hijack the platform, and for DiResta, it settles any remaining question about Facebook's role in the growth of conspiracy networks. Facebook literally helped facilitate a cult, she said. Okay? I feel like any social media site can probably have done the same thing, but we'll see. Next title, a pattern at Facebook. Ooh. For years, company researchers had been running experiments like Carol Smith's to gauge the platform's hand in radicalizing users, according to documents seen by NBC News. This internal work repeatedly found that recommendation tools pushed users into extremist groups, findings that helped inform policy changes and tweaks to recommendations and newsfeed rankings. These rankings are a tentacled, ever-evolving system widely known as the algorithm that pushes content to users, but the research at that time stopped well short of inspiring a movement to change the groups and pages themselves. The reluctance was indicative of a pattern at Facebook. Hagen told reporters this month they want the shortest path between their current policies and any action. Well, sure, obviously they want to take action quickly. They don't want to be sitting there forever just wasting time. There was great hesitancy to proactively solve problems. Yeah, I could see that. I guess there's the old adage, right? If it isn't broken, don't fix it. If they don't think that anything is broken or they don't really see some problem, they're not going to really go to drastically change the website. A Facebook spokesperson disputed that the research had not pushed the company to act and pointed to changes to groups announced in March. While QAnon followers committed real-world violence in 2019 and 2020, groups and pages related to the conspiracy theory skyrocketed, according to internal documents. The documents also show how teams inside Facebook took concrete steps to understand and address those issues, some of which employees saw too little too late. Okay. By summer 2020, Facebook was hosting thousands of private QAnon groups and pages with millions of members and followers, according to an unreleased internal investigation. A year after the FBI designated QAnon as a potential domestic terrorist threat in the wake of standoffs, alleged planned kidnappings, harassment campaigns, and shootings, Facebook labeled QAnon a violence-inciting conspiracy network and banned it from the platform. Along with militants and other violent social movements, a small team working across several of Facebook's departments found its platforms had hosted hundreds of ads on Facebook and Instagram worth thousands of dollars and millions of views, praising, supporting, or representing the conspiracy theory. Okay, well, yeah, that could be, okay, so that could be the fault of the platform, right? If obviously it says they ran ads, somebody clearly had to look at those ads and let them through. So I will grade it to them on that one. That one probably they could have done better. For many employees inside Facebook, the enforcement came too late, according to posts left on Workplace, the company's internal message board. Okay, bringing up concerns. We've known for over a year now that our recommendation systems can very quickly lead users down a path to the conspiracy theories in groups. One integrity researcher, whose name has been redacted, wrote in a post announcing she was leaving the company. This fringe group has grown to national prominence with QAnon congressional candidates and QAnon hashtags and groups trending in the mainstream. We were willing to act only after things had spiraled into a dire state. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, now we do have elected officials and stuff who talk about QAnon and stuff like that. So yeah, I guess it is kind of gotten a little bit out of control. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much proactiveness what they could have also had there. We should be concerned. While Facebook's ban initially appeared effective, a problem remained. The removal of groups and pages, it didn't wipe out QAnon's most extreme followers, who continued to organize on the platform. Yeah, of course, obviously. I mean, if you're just going to ban everything, you're just going to further entrench people when you do that. There was enough evidence to raise red flags in the expert community that Facebook and other platforms failed to address QAnon's violent extremist dimension, said Marc-Andre Argentino, a research fellow at King's College London's International Centre for the Study of Radicalization, who has extensively studied QAnon. Believers simply rebranded as anti-child trafficking groups or migrated to other communities, including those around the anti-vaccine movement. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, that's going to happen in any kind of thing. Again, if you ban something, if you keep pushing back against them over and over again, eventually, what you're going to get is you're just going to get them to go. They're going to rebrand another group. They're going to get further in. They're going to just further entrench themselves. It was a natural fit. Researchers inside Facebook studying the platform's niche communities found violent conspiratorial beliefs to be connected to COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy. In one study, researchers found QAnon community members were also highly concentrated in anti-vaccine communities. Anti-vaccine influencers had similarly embraced the opportunity of the pandemic and used Facebook's features like groups and live streaming to grow their movements. We do not know if QAnon created the preconditions for vaccine hesitancy beliefs, researchers wrote. That definitely didn't happen. That was way before that. It may not matter either way. We should be concerned about people affected by both problems. Okay. QAnon believers also jumped to groups promoting former President Donald Trump's false claim that the 2020 election was stolen. Groups that trafficked in a hodgepodge of baseless conspiracy theories alleging voters, Democrats, and election officials were somehow cheating Trump out of a second term. This new coalition, largely organized on Facebook, ultimately stormed the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, according to a report included in the document trove and first reported by BuzzFeed News in April. These conspiracy groups had become the fastest growing groups on Facebook, according to the report, but Facebook wasn't able to control their metric growth, the researchers wrote, because we were looking at each entity individually rather than as a cohesive movement. Okay, that makes sense. If they're approaching it just in the wrong way, then yeah, obviously it's not going to do well. If they're thinking of, each of these groups is this little tiny individual thing, that's one thing. But if it's actually you're approaching it as a network, then yeah, you probably could have taken care of it better. A Facebook spokesperson told BuzzFeed News it took many steps to limit election misinformation, but that it was unable to catch everything. Facebook's enforcement was piecemeal. The team of researchers wrote, noting, "We're building tools and protocols and having policy discussion to help us do this better next time." Next section, a heavy problem. The attack in the Capitol invited harsh self-reflection from employees. One team invoked the lessons learned during QAnon's movement to warn about permissiveness with anti-vaccine groups and content, which researchers found comprised up to half of all vaccine content impressions on the platform. In rapidly developing situations, we've often taken minimal action to initially due to a combination of policy and product limitations, making it extremely challenging to design, get approval for, and roll out new interventions quickly. QAnon was offered as an example of the time when Facebook was prompted by societal outcry at the resulting harms to implement entity takedowns for a crisis in which we initially took limited or no action. The effort to overturn the election was also invigorated efforts to clean up the platform in a more proactive way. Okay. Facebook's dangerous content team formed a working group in early 2021 to figure out ways to deal with the kind of users who had been a challenge for Facebook, communities including QAnon, COVID denialists, and the misogynist incel movement that weren't obvious hate or terrorism groups, but that by their nature posed a risk to the safety of individuals and society. This one I'm not sure about. I feel like that's a little bit out of left field. Yes, that can be, these groups can be kind of a problem sometimes, but I don't know if I would lump them in with QAnon and COVID denialists. But I don't know. I don't know much. I'm not too familiar with it, so I couldn't say I know everything about them. Maybe there is overlap there. I'm not sure. The focus wasn't to eradicate them, but to curb the growth of these newly branded harmful topic communities with the same algorithmic tools that had allowed them to grow out of control. We know how to detect and remove harmful content, adversarial actors, and malicious coordinated networks, but we have yet to understand the added harms associated with the formation of harmful communities, as well as how to deal with them, the team wrote in a 2021 report. In a February report, they got creative. An integrity team detailed an internal system meant to measure and protect users against societal harms, including radicalization, polarization, and discrimination that its own recommendation system had helped cause. Building on a previous research effort dubbed Project Rabbit Hole, it sounds weird, the new program was dubbed Drebel. Cornelius Drebel was a 17th century Dutch engineer known for inventing the first navigable submarine and the first thermostat. That's fun. This group was tasked with discovering and ultimately stopping the paths that moved users toward harmful content on Facebook and Instagram, including anti-vaccine and QAnon groups. A post from the team praised the earlier research on test users. We believe Drupal will be able to scale this up significantly. Group joins can be an important signal and pathways for people going forward towards harmful and disruptive communities. The group stated in a post to Workplace, Facebook's internal message board, disrupting this path can prevent further harm. Well, there you go. I mean, that's something I think that's sort of proactive and sort of a good thing, right? Like, if you can see what the indicators are and you say, well, okay, people who tend to follow these groups, let's say this checklist of groups, tend to be the ones that go too far, go to this one group. So then you check on those and you sort of put a stop to it before it gets out of control. In March, the Drupal group posted about its progress via a study and suggested a way forward. If researchers could systematically identify the gateway groups, those that fed into anti-vax and QAnon communities, they wrote, maybe Facebook could put up roadblocks to keep people from falling through the rabbit hole. Yeah, exactly what I said. Okay. The Drupal Gateway Groups study looked back at a collection of QAnon and anti-vax groups that had been removed for violating policies around misinformation and violence and incitement. It used the membership of these groups, purged groups, to study how users had been pulled in. Drupal identified 5931 QAnon groups with 2.2 million total members, half of which joined through so-called gateway groups. For 913 anti-vax groups with 1.7 million members, the study identified 1 million had joined via gateway groups. It does recognize it needs to do more. Okay. Facebook integrity employees warned in an early report that anti-vax groups could become more extreme. I expect to see a bridge between online and offline, the report said. We might see motivated users create sub-communities with other highly motivated users to plan action to stop vaccination. Possible, but not likely. A separate cross-department group reported this year that vaccine hesitancy in the US closely resembled QAnon and Stop the Steal movements, primarily driven by authentic actors and community building. We found, like many problems at Facebook, the team wrote, that this is a head-heavy problem with relatively few number of actors creating large percentage and content and growth, or of the content and growth. The Facebook spokesperson said the company had focused on outcomes in relation to COVID-19 and it had seen vaccine hesitancy decline by 50%, according to a survey it had conducted with Carnegie Mellon and University of Maryland. Whether Facebook's newest integrity initiatives will be able to stop the next dangerous conspiracy theory movement or the violent organization of existing movements remains to be seen. But their policy recommendations may carry more weight now that the violence of January 6th laid bare the outsized influence and dangers of even the smallest extreme communities and the misinformation that fuels them. The power of community, when based on harmful topics or ideologies, potentially poses a greater threat to our users than any single piece of content, adversarial actor, or malicious network, a 2021 report concluded. And finally, the Facebook spokesperson said the recommendations in the de-amplification roadmap are on track. This is important work, and we have a long track record of using our research to inform changes to our apps, the spokesperson wrote. Drupal is consistent with this approach, and its research helped inform our decision this year to permanently stop recommending civic, political, or news groups on our platforms. We are proud of this work, and we expect to continue to inform public product and policy decisions going forward. And there's just a few partial corrections they made in terms of number rather than different just number corrections, it looks like. So yeah, that was quite a lot. But what it sounds like is okay. It sounds like it's sort of that Facebook does have a lot of work to do, but I think they're correct when they said up here that they were focusing more on these gateway groups, right? So because like they said in the beginning when they did their test case with that fake that sort of like test user. They set them up to be recommended these things because they just checked all the boxes. They said, well, what's more likely to find, what's more likely to get us into these groups, right? And they checked all the boxes and they found out exactly what it was going to do. So, yeah, I think that's probably the good way to approach it, right? Take care of these things they call gateway groups, see what people are joining, see where trends are heading, and say, okay, we see this trend going on. We know that people are who start out in these smaller, less radical groups end up getting pulled further and further. So perhaps that is the way to go about it in the future, where you're going to be looking into getting folks or tracking these gateway groups so that it sort of prevents people from going in any further. But with that, that is all I have today. Hopefully you learned something, got some more information about this whole Facebook issue. If there's anything that you want to add, anything you know, please feel free to leave it in the comments down below.